It's now time for Beyond the Podium segment, joined now by William Ihlenfeld. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
So you're running for state senate. Why are you running?
So back in February, I got a call and I was asked to jump into this race. No one had filed on the Democratic side of the ticket for state senate in the 1st senatorial district, and I didn't at that moment have any plans to run for elective office in 2018. I'd always thought about maybe returning to public service at some point in time, but I was surprised to receive the call, and I gave it a lot of thought. They gave me about a week to decide. They said they wanted a decision within 7 days, and so I just kind of looked around me. I looked around my neighborhood and my county and the Panhandle to see what was going on and to see if I thought I could bring added value to the state senate. At the time, the teachers' work stoppage was in full force, and so I could literally look outside of my window and see teachers who were out on the line. Those teachers inspired me to get into the race. Their grit and their determination caused me to want to be a voice for not only teachers, but all public employees. But then I also was aware of some other things going on in Charleston that didn't sit quite right with me, that I thought I could, again, bring added value, that my voice I thought would make a difference based upon my knowledge and my background and my experience. And so I decided to get off the sidelines, get into the game, and I filed within a week of getting that call in February.
Let's talk about those teachers and education in the state of West Virginia. Were the teachers given enough in that deal? What needs to be done next?
I think we need to continue to work on the issue. I come from a family of teachers. My mom is a retired teacher, although she likes to go back and substitute still. My sister's a teacher. My wife is a therapist in the school system. I think there's a lot of work left to be done, particularly when it comes to health insurance and with PEIA. That's something that still needs to be addressed, and there's been a task force, there's been a lot of work done since the time of the work stoppage, and we need to make sure that we address that issue, that it's fully funded, and that we try to prevent so much money from coming out of teachers' pockets and try to leave them with more at the end of the month. So a lot of work left to be done, both now and going forward.
What are some ways that you could fund that, could fund PEIA? Because that was the major sticking point.
Sure, yeah. One of the ways that PEIA could be funded is through the severance tax and increasing that by a couple of percentage points. And that's something that I'm certainly interested in considering. Right now, I think our severance tax is probably lower than it needs to be. And if we were to raise that severance tax by a couple of points, we would generate additional revenue and enough to help address the shortfall in PEIA. The other thing to keep in mind is that going forward, I believe, and this isn't just based upon my opinion, it's based upon research and talking to other people who study this industry both locally and nationally, I think we're on the verge of an economic boom here in the Ohio Valley. And I think that the amount of natural gas that's going to be produced between Monaca, PA and Dilly's Bottom, Ohio, and the Panhandle sits right in between, is going to be enormous. And I think if we set ourselves up right, if we put the tax at the right rate, that we're going to have enough money not only to pay for PEIA, but also to pay for good salaries for working families in West Virginia, to take care of our roads and bridges, and to do many of the other things that we need to do in West Virginia that we're unable to do. So that all kind of ties back to your question, how do we fix PEIA? I think it's making sure that we prepare ourselves and take full advantage of this boom that I'm very optimistic is going to happen here in the next few years.
Well, two of the biggest stories in the state of West Virginia the last 2 years have been, of course, the teacher strike and then the road referendum. All that money going toward roads and infrastructure in West Virginia, but not a lot of results yet. Why is that, in your opinion? And how do you expedite and make sure that a lot of folks up here in this region aren't left out when it comes time?
And if you're talking about the road referendum, the bond that was passed, one thing that causes me some concern is the estimates for the initial projects have come in much higher than they anticipated. And so there's a long list of projects that were promised during that referendum to all of us as voters, and many of us supported it. Obviously, it wouldn't have passed otherwise. So I do have some concern that we're not going to be able to see all of those projects through to the finish. We're not going to, the promises that were made won't be fulfilled. So that is somewhat of a concern to me. But we do need to make sure that we pound our fist up here in the Northern Panhandle. We can't let Charleston forget about the Northern Panhandle. Some of us up here in the Northern Panhandle who have lived here all of our lives have a chip on our shoulders. I know that I do. We feel like Charleston forgets about Wheeling. People in Weirton think that they're forgotten about and that the state stops at Wheeling, and I can understand why. I've talked to so many people out on the campaign trail who feel like their needs aren't being recognized, and that Charleston needs to pay more attention. And that's, we need a loud voice from our state senators to make sure that Charleston doesn't forget about us, and that whether it's a road project or anything else that's happening in our state, that we're part of the conversation and that we're part of the solution.
What's the best way to solve the opioid crisis? Maybe something that hasn't been done yet or executed to the best of the state's ability.
That's a huge problem. That's a big part of my platform, to loosen the grip of addiction here in West Virginia. I think it starts with leadership. We don't have anyone leading the way on that issue. We need a cabinet-level drug czar who's going to work 7 days a week on the issue. We have an Office of Drug Control Policy. We've had a couple of directors who have cycled in and out of that position. But that wasn't a cabinet-level position. We need someone who sits at the right hand of the governor, who works on the issue daily, and who is able to pull together what is a very complex problem to fix. And so there's a lot of things that we're not doing that we should be doing when it comes to enforcement, treatment, prevention, reentry, recovery. And I don't know how long we have for this interview, but I can tell you, starting with enforcement, for example, we can do a better job of mapping overdoses and of predicting when the next bad batch is going to come. That technology exists. It's being used in small pockets of West Virginia. If we can't see the problem, how can we fix the problem? There's a program in place that we could spread throughout the state of West Virginia. It could be in every county in this state if someone would simply make the effort to do that. I've actually worked in bringing it to a couple of small communities in West Virginia. It could be throughout the state. When we talk about reentry, we need to do a better job of helping people who leave our jails and prisons get employment and get housing. Most of the people that are incarcerated in West Virginia are there because of a substance abuse related issue. 90% or so of people that are incarcerated come out at some point in time. We need to make sure that they get back on their feet so they don't go back to a life of using and then committing crimes to feed their habits. The other thing we need to do is to address recovery. Recovery is something that not many people give very much thought to, but we have thousands of people in West Virginia who are right now fighting to maintain their sobriety. When someone becomes addicted to opioids, it rewires their brain. And even though they might not have used for a period of time, they still have those cravings, they still have those urges, and they're in a battle right now in recovery trying to stop or trying to continue their and maintain their sobriety. We need to do more to help people who are in recovery as well. So I guess the last thing I'll say, it's a long answer to your question. There are a lot of good things happening in West Virginia right now, from Martinsburg to Huntington and all places in between. West Virginia University Hospitals is doing some great work. We need a leader who's going to pull all of it together. We need to pull together the prevention program they're working on in Martinsburg, the data-driven approach in Huntington, the telemedicine that they're using in Morgantown. Pull it all in under one roof, have one leader, and make sure that we take advantage of all the great things we're doing in West Virginia and pull it all together so that the entire state can benefit from the good things that are going on here.
Now, a couple of questions about taxes now. Tax reform on the federal level, besides lowering taxes for some folks, dealt a pretty big blow to Obamacare, and a lot of West Virginians have poor health care. They rely on Medicaid, they rely on Medicare. How would you ensure or make it easier for West Virginians to get quality health care?
That's a very difficult issue, not something that state senators have a lot of control over because of the federal influence over all of that. One thing that I want to make sure for older West Virginians who are struggling sometimes to pay co-pays and to make sure they get the treatment they need is to, and you talk about taxes, would be to eliminate the tax on Social Security income in West Virginia. We're one of only 13 states that taxes Social Security benefits. Older West Virginians don't have enough money in their pocket at the end of the month to pay their bills, whether they're related to health care or anything else. And so we need to eliminate that tax. There's been an opportunity in the state Senate to do that. The powers that be in the Senate decided not to. That's one thing that I would push for, would be to eliminate the Social Security tax on older West Virginians.
Are average West Virginians seeing enough of the benefit from the tax cuts federally? Do you think they are?
No. I think the tax cuts were positive, and I think many people are happy. Many people are seeing more money in their paycheck, but I don't think it goes far enough. I don't think your average West Virginian benefited enough from those tax cuts, and I'd like to see those tax cuts go even further so that more people in West Virginia get the benefit of them. So it's a positive. I just wish it would go a little bit further.
Unprecedented stuff happening right now with the West Virginia Supreme Court. As a legislative body, what can be done to prevent something like this from happening again?
So the legislature has taken a step in putting an amendment on the ballot that would take away control of the budget from the courts and give it, at least in part, back to the legislature. And so the voters will have that before them in November, and I think that's a good thing. I think we do need to rein in that kind of activity. It is unprecedented. It's a black eye on the state. The extravagant spending by these justices, regardless of what their party is, Republican or Democrat, they all spent taxpayer money recklessly. So I think the amendment is a good first step. The other thing that I would do if I were in the state Senate, I would form an office of Inspector General. This would be the government's watchdog. This would be somebody who would watch for fraud, waste, and abuse. And this would be a person who's independent of the legislature, who would be down there not only to make sure that Supreme Court justices weren't spending lavishly in their offices, but also keeping an eye on the rest of government, keeping an eye on the legislature, keeping an eye on the executive branch. But we actually, we need an office like that. I wish we didn't. Other states have it, and something like that would pay for itself because of the fraud and waste that it would prevent.
Now, the state, the region went very heavily for Donald Trump. It's pretty deep red right now in West Virginia. You're a Democrat trying to break in. What are the challenges that you're facing trying to get folks to realize that, in your opinion at least, the Republican way is not the best way?
Well, it's interesting. I have a lot of Republican friends. I actually have a lot of Republicans who have offered to support my campaign. They've either made campaign donations, or they have a sign in their yard, or they're walking door to door for me. So I see myself as a centrist. I see myself as what I call a West Virginia Democrat, someone who is more like Senator Robert C. Byrd than maybe some of the national Democrats that people think of when they hear that term. I am born and raised here. I understand the struggles that people face here in the Ohio Valley. I've talked to those people on their front porches since I got into this campaign, and I can relate to them. And I think that I understand their issues, and I think they understand where I'm coming from. So I understand how politics have shifted in West Virginia, but I think I'm well suited to be that voice of common sense, that voice of reason, that person who's going to be able to see it from both angles. And the other thing that I would do if I get elected, if I'm fortunate enough to win this race, I will work across the aisle with people from the other party. I think we have way too much screaming and shouting among politicians, not just in West Virginia, but throughout the country. I'm the type of person who will reach my hand out, who will try to work with the other side, and will do everything I can to make a difference. I'm not going to compromise my principles. But I'm going to go to Charleston with an open mind, and I'm going to do everything I can to work with the other side, because that's the only way we're going to get things done, is if we work together, regardless of who's in power. Right now, the Republicans are in power. That could flip. I'm not a political analyst. Some people say the House in West Virginia could flip. I don't know if that's the case or not. Regardless of who's in power, I will work with the other side to try to do everything I can to fix the opioid crisis, to clean up corruption, and to lower taxes, and to do everything else we need to make our state even better than it already is.
William Ihlenfeld, thank you so much. Good luck on Election Day. We'll see you at the debate.
Thank you.